on a certain level, to understand the connection between the Chet of Adam Rishon and to some degree the essential tachlis from then on in the Bria, from then all the way to Olam Haba, the connection between the two, specifically the Yemot Mashiach. Again, we want to start a little bit before, and we're going to go into a little more detail. We're not going to go into tremendous detail because it requires a lot more knowledge, idea. But what I want to do is begin to draw an idea of what has been the specific objective in the Bria, and since the time of Adam Rishon, what has happened since then until the time of the Yemot Mashiach, in terms of the course of action that's involved, to get an idea of where we're moving to in some. Just quickly to review for some people, well, we spoke about Zichar Guf. We said very briefly, very simply, that the tachlis of Adam Rishon was to do the mitzvah. Mitzvah, in that sense, was the license, and not to eat from the Eitz Hadas, Tevara. If he had done that mitzvah, what would have happened? What essentially would have happened was his neshama, which was created in a diminished state and put into the body, would have suddenly become much more invigorated by new oris. There would have been ha'ora on the neshama would have been invigorated by a very powerful aura, and it would have been mashlim, that neshama. With that new koyach of aura that it would have possessed, it automatically would have taken the guf, which is composed of a totally different kind of substance, a much lower substance, and it would have mezach, it would have purified that guf, so that the guf would have lost the gashmius that it had, right? And it would have become like glass relative to ruchnius. And then the neshama could therefore receive ruchnius, or the hatova, the aura from the Banisham, the Shechina, straight, even through the guf. In other words, what we're saying is that if Adam Rishon had not done the sin, his neshama would have purified the guf, and together they would have gone into Olam Haba, or rather, together they would have created Olam Haba, which would have been this world in a state of very high purification in terms of its substance.
What would make a difference?
Is this clear? I don't know if you know what I'm saying. It's a little.
Well, we'll review it next week.
Review it next week. Okay, we're going to review it anyway, so we'll do it.
You mentioned the neshama mezach or the iris, which is going to do
the neshama is mezach, but it cannot be mezach unless it has a certain capacity. It has to have a certain amount of shleimus to do it.
Step one, the iris. Step two, the neshama. The iris gives the neshama the capacity to mezach.
Right.
Then the guf is mezach, and then it's the complete.
Okay, to put it in this order, there are three steps. First of all, when you do the mitzvah, the neshama is kind of oris come down, and it's kind of oris. That's called, it's the neshama is said to be nizdaher, in Russian zohar. It radiates with splendor. Okay, it's nizdaher. Once the neshama is nizdaher, it becomes more mushlam. It's much more powerful. It then has the koyach now to take the guf, which is a much lower substance, and purify, change its substance, so that it's now subject to ruchnius, and that's called zichor haguf. So, the mitzvah brings down what's called he'ora, step one. Number two, there's a process called zihirus, or it's nizdaher. You know what I mean? It develops full capacity, and then it takes the guf and is mezacheh. Okay, that's the third thing. And the zichur haguf constitutes the setting for Olam Haba, because not only is the guf nizacheh, but the world becomes nizacheh. Like we said, zichur haguf means zichur of gashmis, of the components of the world, material matter, which is the 92 elements and so on and so forth. So when the person is mezachich his own guf, he's mezachich the entire bria together with it. Man is connected to the bria. So the koyach, the neshama, then will have the koyach to be mezachich all the entire bria itself. And that bria in the state of zichur would have become Olam Haba, which means that there's no more barrier between the neshama and ruchnius. It could feel the full measure of ruchnius from the noisim, the bonashov. Okay? This is essentially was the basic idea. Now, when we said something else, we said what happened. There was a terrible thing that came out of that call of the chet of Adam Rishon. Because Adam Rishon failed to do this, and he didn't do it, he did a chet. What we said was, the nature of a chet was, without going into too much depth, how he did the chet, but the consequence of the chet was that he became David Torah, or to the koyach of that ruchnis, the koyach, which is tomei, it's a tumah, became koyach. So that tumah, therefore, which was normally outside of him, the Yetzirah before Adam Rishon, before the Chet, was outside of him, as represented, personified in the Metzias of the Nachash. And that Nachash was able to have a dialogue with Chava and with Adam or whatever, and attempt to mafata, to seduce them. But it was outside. The being of the Yetzirah, or the Koyach, was external to Adam and external to the Bria. You see. But once he did the Chet, then he allowed the koyach, or the substance of that thing, to merge with the Bria itself. So there was an arvuvia, or there's a mixture of Tov and Ra in the same substance. This was the fundamental result of the Chet of Adam Rishon. This arvuvia was an arvuvia in the guf, so that the tumah went into the guf itself, and it also went into on top of the neshama. It was dovik to the neshama also, which we will get into in a minute. It was dovik on the neshama too. It had a double effect. Now, because of the fact that it was now in the guf, even if the neshama now had the koyach, or the power to be mezachik, it could no longer do it, because it was now a tumah inside the guf. It cannot be mezachik the guf. You see what I'm saying? So we said that the only tikkun that remained for the guf was that the person had to die, and the guf loses its tzur, it loses its substance, its form, by becoming part of the earth. Ela offer tashuv, that was a klala. It goes back into the ground and it loses, it's like a klicheres, it loses its entire tzur, and once it loses tzur, the tumor goes out of it. And then the Bnei Shema take that guf, reconstruct it to a new body, and put the neshama back in, and then the guf now will be in a state where it could be mizdacher, you see, because the tumor is out of it. Now, once the tumor goes out of it, the guf is still chomer, but it's no longer geshmias, it no longer has that tumor in it, you see. And then the neshama comes in, and then has the power to mizdacher, to purify it, and so on. So we said basically that if you compare it to a ladder with two rungs, right? Adam Rishon was placed on the middle rung, and his job was to go to the top rung of Olam Haba. He was put in this world with a certain neshama and a certain level of guf, which was, we said, would had a level called Olam Asiyah. It was a level of substance which was very, very pure, and it was his job to do the mitzvah, koine mu'oris, and mezachit the guf to a higher rung, which is called Olam Haba. He failed to do that, because by doing the chet, he became dovik to Ra, which became part of the entire system, so he dropped down. Now he dropped down. So therefore, he was no longer one rung away from the objective, Olam Haba, but he was two rungs away. You see, his guf and his neshama were now in a state of zoyama, in a state of tumah. So neither of them could, they no longer, you see, could mezach the situation and go to Olam Haba. So, in order to achieve the original objective, Adam would now have to go two steps. Remember we said this? Okay? This was the idea that we left, and that's the union of Tchias HaMesim. That's what we explained with Tchias. That is the concept of Tchias HaMesim. So Tchias HaMesim is a fundamental concept. We'll get into in a minute what the power of that concept is. It's more powerful than we imagine. We spoke a lot of other things last week, but I'm not going to go into them about how the concept of Tigboris Ra, that we see that the immediate consequence of a chet is always that the Ra, or the sitra, the Satan, becomes much more powerful. That he started out, when he first started out with a certain amount of power, but that was the amount of power that he needed just to create the situation of Bechira. That's all. And he had to start out with that power. That power was called a matzav of chesoron. There was a minimum amount of chesoron in the Bria, you see. And he was given that power to provide the possibility of Pito, to take Adam away from Ruchnis and so on. But once Adam did the Chet, then he was given a much greater power. That's called Tigboris Ra, or the expansion of Ra, so that he actually became part of the Bria itself, you see. And that Tigboris Ra is the immediate consequence of Chet. And we said that, for example, in the case of Misa, where because of his entry into the guf, you see, and the person dies and so on, that's his expansion, because the Sitra Achra, the Satan, is a destructive, deteriorative force. Remember we said that? It represents all the degenerative forces in the Bria. So we said that in a certain way, the very fact that he entered the Bria gave the Bria a new chance. Remember we said that last week? Which is that's the way that I'm not going to say Yichud, that's the way the thing works, but we just brought that as an example. One very important consequence, which we will be speaking about many times, is the concept of Arvuvia. Arvuvia comes from Russian Eruv, Arvuvia, a mixture. Since the time of Adam, before the Chet of Adam Rishon, Tov and Ra, which means the kochos of both, or the Ruchnis of both, was separated, as we see clearly by the Nochash and Adam Rishon and Shamo. The Ruchnis and Tumah were separated. They were separate entities. You see, a Chet was a Chet and a mitzvah was a mitzvah. There was no clear distinction. It was black and white. By Adam Rishon creating the Chet, it was a clear. The Bria was in a state of black and white. After the Chet of Adam Rishon, the Bria entered a stage of gray. Gray meaning that once the Yetzer entered Adam, then the Yetzer would now function internally, so that everything that a person does, every mice and so on and so forth, internally has combinations of Yetzer and Yetzer Tov at all times. Everything that's done, everything in the Bria, every substance in the Bria contains both kochos. This is called the Avuvia. And the Avuvia was a direct result of the expansion. You see what I'm saying? The expansion of the Yetzirah. Now, let's just understand this again. The consequence of Chet is the expansion of the koyach of the Satan. Okay? That expansion, okay, is reflected in greater and greater levels of Avuvia. The more chatoim that a person does, the greater the expansion of the Satan. You see, how is that manifest? Continuous Avuvia between Tov and Ra. And this is the koyachas continue to mesh further and further and further. They become more interwoven. You see what I'm saying?
What is the consequence of that?
Well, you'll see in a second what there's greater way in Choshev. But in the beginning of the Bria, where they were separate, Tov and Ra were like this. With Adam Rishon, they became like this. They were touching. They were dovek to each other. And you see, now as man does more and more chatoim, what happens is like this. You see? There's a greater and greater meshing. That's the effect of thing. What the Avuvia is the manifestation of Tigboris Sarah. That's how the Tigboris manifests itself. Okay? It's a very simple, basic principle. I just want you to just understand the principle. We'll begin to see later on many examples of it and what that really means. And ultimately we'll understand structurally why that was necessary, why there had to be an Avuvia in the first place. But that's something further in the distance. Okay, we have the basic understanding of what happened by Adam Rishon with the Chet of Adam Rishon. Okay, we have not examined yet what the Chet was itself. What did the Yetzirah tell Chava that seduced her? What did he do? What argument did he use that convinced Chava to fall? And Adam and so on. Okay, we did not discuss that. So therefore, we have not really discussed the nature of Bechir itself. You see, we're still now talking about the consequences of the Chet. What I'd like to do now is to jump from Adam Rishon all the way to the end of the Bria. Now, which is Kedarka, and then connect the two. The end of the Bria is called Yemot Mashiach. Okay. Now, since Adam Rishon failed to do his job, what the Banishim said is the following. The Banishim said, you have failed to do what I wanted. You have failed to be Masak in the Bria. You have failed to do a Maisa, to do a mitzvah, to raise the Bria to a level of Olam Haba. You have failed to do that. Therefore, that task will no longer be yours, exclusively. So what the Banishim says, what I will do is I will take your neshama, which used to be one neshama, and I will fragment it, split it into many parts. And each part will now rent a group, and each part will become a different person. Although, basically, it was all Adam Rishon at the beginning. And everyone will now have to do what you used to do alone. That's number one. Number two, just like you have failed, it is possible for your fragments to fail as well. Right? So therefore, what I'm going to do is set up a system, very basically, which will last for 6,000 years, from the time of the Bria Olam. You see? In other words, I'm going to allow 6,000 years, you see, for the state, the Tikkun of the Bria to become manifest. You see? That is the maximum amount of time. It cannot go beyond 6,000. If it has not been manifest by 6,000, I will see to it that it becomes manifest. Olam Haba must be. You see, it must be, and man has 6,000 years to do it. Either he does it or I will do it in a certain way, but it must be done by that time. That's called Chazal called a Shis Alfei Shnin, the 6,000 years. Now, where they learn it from, I'm not clear. I don't know exactly where they learn that, what the limit is. But the Chazal know that it corresponds to the 6 days of creation. And the 7th day is Shabbos, which is like Olam Haba. Each day corresponds to 1,000 years. You see, that's how it really corresponds to. But that's clearly what Chazal knows. Now, at the end of 6,000 years, what will happen is the entire world itself becomes mafsid, and it goes into a death-like state, in the sense that it becomes totally into chaos, and it's again rejuvenated, and that's a tchiyah of the Bria itself. But that happens after 6,000. Now, what goes on from the time of Adam Rishon to the year 6,000? Right? That's the question. Now, one of the things that we do know, and that's what we're going to discuss tonight, the essential pattern or structure of the events that go on from there to the end. And we'll begin to have kind of an overview of the movement, of where everything is moving to. We know that before the year 6,000, for a certain number of years, we don't know how many, X number of years is a period called the Yemot HaMashiach. That's what it's called. What is it? We do not know how long. We do not know how long it's going to last because we do not know when it'll be. We know for sure that it's got to be. It must be within 256 years. The world has seen 5,744 years have passed since the B'riyas Ha'olam. There are only 256 years left. You see, at the year 256, the B'riyah will end. So Judaism has put in its own self-destruct system in a sense. The B'riyah will end in another 256 years. The Zman called Olam Hazeh, which is the Zman of Ishtadlus, when the Tikkun of Na'am L'Ksufa must take place, where man must earn his Olam Haba, must end by 6,000, which means we only have another 256 years left. Okay? What we do know is the following, that before the end, there will be a certain period called Yemot Mashiach that will last a certain amount of time. We do not know, because we don't know when it will be. Nobody knows when it will be. But let's assume, for example, it's going to be in the year 1990, which means that it's going to be 250 years long. 1990 means there are 250 years left to the year 6000. Okay? The B'riyah ends in 2240. Strange. That's exactly what it is. In the year 2240, the B'riyah ends. Now that's the annus termini, the terminal date of Olam Hazeh. If I may create my own term. Annus termini. Okay. That period is called the Yemot Mashiach. Now, what will be the characteristics of that period? Well, it's going to be a very fascinating period, to say the least. All Jews, some basic characteristics of it. All the Jews will live in Eretz Yisrael, number one. There will be no longer any Golos. No Jews will live outside. All the Jews will live in Eretz Yisrael. They will have a Beis HaMikdash again, the third day of Mikdash. And the Shechina, there will be Hashvuot HaShechina. The Shechina will be back down. All Jews will be Nevi'im, Mikot Nad Godel. Every Jew will be distinguished by the fact that he's able to see the future and he's able to relate to a level of Ruchnius, which is on the level of Nevi'us, every Yid, and so on. There will be Shalom again. There will be no wars at all whatsoever, and all the Jews will be concerned with Ruchnius. The Goyim will also be concerned with Ruchnius, except that their Ruchnius will come in some way through an association with Jews. They will realize, you see, at that time, that the whole Ruchnius, or the Tachlis of the B'riyah, lies with Klal Yisrael, and they will begin to attach themselves to Klal Yisrael, just like a person, for example, who feels that he wants to get a person feels that he wants to know certain information, goes to a library, for example, and sits down and reads the information, or whatever happens. All Goyim of the world, all people who live at that time will know that Ruchnius lies in Yerushalayim. V'nei Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh. Yerushalayim will be the center of the Torah at that time, which itself will also be somewhat different. But at that time, and all Goyim will tend to associate with Yidden because that will be their kesher to Ruchnius. What is the fundamental feature? And on top of all that will be an individual, and his name will be the Mashiach ben David. That will be his name. He is an individual who is a human being who is descended from David HaMelech. Benach Doach Hador, from David HaMelech. He will be a Melech. He will have his castle or palace in Yerushalayim, right? And he will have a kingdom. But his kingdom will be the entire world.
He's going to be from that generation, a person living in that generation?
Yes. Person living in that generation. And he will be a king of the entire world. He will be a Melech of the Kol HaOlam. All the Goyish nations will no longer have Malachim. They will have regions, provincial governors, and so on. The king of the world, or the Melech HaOlam, will be the Mashiach himself. And he will reign over the entire B'riyah. Now, what is the Tachlis of the Mashiach ben David? Basically, very simple, is to govern the entire world, number one. But more fundamentally, his Tachlis is to govern the world not only administratively, you see, but in terms of Ruchnius. It is his job to see that the Ruchnius which is necessary, that Klal Yisrael is Makabel their Ruch. He will be the combination like of a Kohen Gadol and a Nasi together. So that he will be the spiritual of Klal Yisrael, to see to it that everything that Klal Yisrael needs in terms of Ruchnius will be there. Now that's a very special function. He will be the person who will be giving the shiurim and the one who is the mashpia of Torah of Klal Yisrael at that time. He will be the head of the Beis Medrash. He will be the Rosh Yeshiva. His palace will become it will be a palace, but in essence, he will be the Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva Gedolah at that time, which is called Beis Medrash and Mashiach. That's essentially what it is. So he functions not only as a melech, but also as a Rosh Yeshiva, in that sense, as a manhig, a spiritual manhig. Okay? So we have kind of an idea of what will be like in the Yemei Mashiach. That's number one. Number two, there's several other things that will go on. We're not going to go into that. One of the things that will go on, people will live very long. People will still have Yetzer Haras, but very small Yetzer Haras. Very, very slight Yetzer Haras. Most of the Yetzer Haras that we are familiar with now will be gone. Will no longer be. Okay? And
would you say that there will be a kemat tikkun tilpul?
well, I don't want to say no. Let's leave that alone.
Isn't it a focus in the Mishnah? What's going to be then?
The shita that I'm telling you, okay, basically, there are many machlokes in Gemara about what the Mashiach will be and what it's like and so on. Essentially, the way I understand it and so on, it's very difficult to understand the Tanoim, the machlokes and Amoraim and Tanoim on that. Their machlokes is somewhat difficult to understand. The Rishonim themselves have tried to understand what is being said about this and so on and so forth. As far as I'm concerned, the sheet of everything that I'm telling you now, the basic ideas, a lot of ideas of Mashiach, plus in the way I understand it, and so on, and from everything, is essentially based on the Kabbalah Ha'ari. It's based on the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, but it comes from the Kabbalah of the Ari. And the Kabbalah of the Ari is essentially the foundation of Yiddishkeit from his time. There is no one that has ever disputed his system of the Kabbalah of the Ari. Either the Litvaks, the Misnagdim or Hasidim, the Baal Shem is based on the Kabbalah Sari, and the Misnagdim, the Vilna Gaon was based on the Kabbalah Sari. Everything, once the Ari came on the scene, he was like the Moshe Rabbeinu in the sense of the Chochmas HaNisra, or the Chochmas HaPnimius. And from that time on, there has never been a machlokes against the Ari. You will never see such a thing. Now, before the Ari, of course, now the Ari got his Kabbalah from Eliyahu Novi, from many other things and so on. He's a very big Himmel Yid and so on. And I think we once spoke a little about the Ari himself, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. But the way he understood things is the way essentially all Klal Yisrael is makabel, and the way basically it is. Now, before the Ari came along, there were many machlokes in terms of what will happen on the Rishonim themselves. And the main shita which is known besides the shita of the Ari, although is the shita of the Rambam. Shita of the which the Shita Rambam is very clear in Hilchos, I think it's Hilchos Malachim. It's very clear. But the Shita of the Rambam is not based on a Kabbalah. It's based on an understanding of the Gemara in terms of the way he understood it and so on, and the way he understood Shmuel, because he passed things like Shmuel. That there's no difference between Yemei Mashiach and before except Shibud Machas Bilvad. Now, I forget the exact lashon of it. Yeah, the Yemei Mashiach. But the shaila is what part of the Yemei Mashiach. There are different phases of Yemei Mashiach and so on. And essentially what they want to say is the Shmuel was talking about Yemei Mashiach in the Mashiach ben Yosef, not Mashiach ben David. So there's a lot of things. But the Rambam himself clearly says that he has, that these yonim about Mashiach, amazing, he received no Kabbalah of these things. He himself was not clear. In the Monavuchim, he writes, when he writes in the third chilek of the Monavuchim, which is his Sefer on Ashkofa, he writes that the great deal of the Sefer is based on a synthesis between Aristotelian philosophy, the metaphysics of the Greeks, of Aristotle, and Chochmas HaTorah. Because he writes himself, I've really had no Kabbalah on Hashkafa, other than really what I understand myself. And therefore I've taken Chochmas Chetzonis out of Chochmas, the Greek philosophers, especially Aristotle, and through his understanding of things, been mitzvah that in Yiddishkeit. In the third chilek of the Monavuchim, for example, when he writes about the Ma'aseh Merkava, Yechezkel, which is one of the key things in Kabbalah, he says, I want you to know in Agdom, he says, I have no Kabbalah on what these things mean. It means I receive nothing from my Rebbe. I don't have any tradition, from these things. And whatever the Chachamim say, Chazal say, is really not that understandable. But the following is my interpretation of the Ma'aseh Merkava based on my understanding of metaphysics and Chochmas HaTeva. He writes this clearly himself. That's why the Rambam himself, there's many machlokes in the Rambam and the Ramban, but the Ramban was the Makubal already. The Rambam wasn't. The Rambam was called the Mechka. On the Ramban, that is right. The Rambam himself was what's called the Mechka. He was what's called the Kuf of the Rishonim. There were many Rishonim that did not have a Kabbalah from their Rebbes about what these Inyanim are, except what they understood on their own from the Gemara, and their understanding was of course very great. And what they were able to mitzvah from other Chachmas, the Arab Chachmas, there was at that time, the Rav Sadia going in Emunus V'Deis. His Emunus V'Deis is also based, very similar like the Rambam, it's based on a philosophical understanding of the Torah, not on a Kabbalistic understanding of the Torah, in that sense. And a great deal of his Torah is taken from the Arabian philosophers, and you don't know much about that period, but in the time of Rav Sadia, in the 10th century, 11th, 12th century, the Arab philosophers were very great. Islam, it's not like it is today. The Muslim philosophers were the greatest Chachamim in the world at that time. The Christians were barbarians connected to the Arabs at that time. The Christians at that time were from Europe, and so if you know about history, at that time was the beginning of the Crusades. Even in England and all the countries, you were dealing with a lot of the barbarian hordes from the Roman Empire in the 9th, 8th, 9th, 10th century and so on, and they were very primitive. In England, for example, which is a great country today, you had the Druids and the Celts. They were like very extremely primitive and cruel people. These were the Goyim that lived at that time, and so on. The Chochmah resided at that time in southern Europe, Spain, and North Africa, and the whole Middle East, which were the Muslims. It was Islam and Sunni, and they were very great. They were very great systems. And what they did, they had the book called the Quran, which was written in the 7th century ACE. And so on, and it was based a great deal on Yiddishkeit, but the Arab philosophers who attempt to be mafarish the Quran borrowed from Aristotle, and would start the Quran with Aristotle, and that system of tziruf between Islam and Aristotelian philosophy was called the Kalam. That was the Arab the Kalam, and that was a very significant system. By the time Rav Sadia Al-Fayumi, Rav Sadia came into was extended. That was a Choshev system, and the same thing the Rambam. And there were many Purushim written from the Arabs on Aristotle. There were I doubt if any of you heard the terms Averroes, Avicenna, some very big Arab, and the Rambam quotes these people in the Monavuchim. These were strict Arab philosophers. Now you think, well, Arabs today, we're talking about what the Arabs used to be a long time. They used to be the crown of the Bria. In fact, a great deal of mathematics comes from the Arabs. Algebra, a lot of things were first written by the Arabs and then later taken into Christian Europe. You see, but there was a time when all Christendom were very primitive, and it was Islam that was very great, until they took a downturn, and then Christianity became very great. That was their Kufa, and so on. But the Rambam and many of the Rishonim and so on have tremendous connections with the Arabs at that time, and borrowed heavily from that kind of thing, and they built the thing. So I'm just trying to answer you from that kind of source. So the thing is, the Rambam himself clearly says that his understanding of these Inyanim is based on what he understands, in terms of the Chokmas and his understanding of Chazal. What's that? Yeah.
What does the Rambam say about it?
Well, essentially, he says the only difference between the Moshe Mashiach and before Moshe Mashiach is the fact that there will no longer be a Golus. All the Jews will be back in Eretz Yisrael. That's it. But the Goyim will still be strong, Choshev Goyim, and life will be the same, except the fact that there will be peace. All the Jews will live in Israel, and there will be essentially peace, but essentially life will be basically the same.
What will bring about Moshe Mashiach?
Well, what's in Muhammad's guiding Maluk?
So a lot of questions.
Must there be?
Yes.
Why must there be?
Yes, there must be.
And there's no period. Could be a year. Could be.
How long will the Moshe Mashiach last? Nobody knows.
Will you explain why there must be?
Yes, that's what I'll explain tonight. Tonight we're going to go into the concept, what is the Moshe Mashiach and why must there be? And why every Jew is to believe that there will be. Ani mame b'emunah shleina, she'af she'yismamea. So, I mean, that's one of the strict emunas.
Are you going to go into the Mechama also?
No, that's a detail already. I'm not going to go into the Mechok.
The Ramban wrote extensively on Moshe Mashiach.
Yeah, the Machlokes between Rambam and Rambam.
Where did he wrote the extensively?
There's a Machlokes between Rambam and Rambam.
Yeah, that's right.
And Shah's Muli writes extensively.
It's on the whole business side of it, and all its manifestations.
But in Yom Mashiach, he discusses that specifically?
I don't know. Possibly.
It's
I don't know.
emphasis on the Moshe Mashiach, like,
The only thing I ever saw in Yom Mashiach where he...
There's not much basis in the Rambam.
Even the Ramban doesn't know. I don't know. I'm not clear. I never really went through, but I read his disputations.
there's nobody in those times that are in Kabul or anything like that?
It was not clear. Even the Ramban writes, for example, when they try and understand things about Yom Mashiach, about the Mashiach himself, all the things, it was very unclear, very unclear.
It was. Yechidim, they didn't have license to write it down.
The Yechidim that knew it, but they right. They never know. They never know. These things were very clear. What? A great deal of the Indian of Mashiach and the Moshe Mashiach also is revealed in a very incredible sefer from the Ramchal. And the Ramchal, one of the Sfom, which is a very amazing sefer, is right, but it's not easy to understand. And so on. And there's a sefer that the Ramchal lived in about in the early 1700s, and about 40 years before he was born, there was a man called Shapsa Tzvi, who was an individual. The whole mitzvah there about him, he was a false Mashiach, and so on. And a lot of Klal Yisrael believed in him. And many years later, the Ramchal wrote a sefer called Kinnis Hashem Tzvokos, attempting to explain why Shapsa Tzvi was a false Mashiach. Now Shapsa Tzvi had a shita, and so on, and he tried to explain it. He was a very big Makobel and tried to explain many things, but he perverted and twisted a lot of things. So Ramchal wrote Kinnis Hashem Tzvokos to explain that. And in that sefer, he's Megala, tremendous sefer that he writes. I have the sefer. I tell you, his lashon in the sefer. He says, I want you to know. He says that the things that I'm about to write down now is osel lahar hebom. You're not allowed to even think about these things. Culture chein lichtei vom verabim. That's what he says. These things are, he says,
because of the need, right?
Because of the need, because of Islasais and so on. He's got to be Megala these things to show what the false things. Obviously, all these things that have to do with Yom Mashiach were not known. Were mamash not known. They're not known clearly.
Before they realized they were not privy in public domain.
Yeah, they weren't public domain. It's mashma, they weren't even known to some of the Talmidim of the area also. But obviously they were very much minister and so on. But from Svom that he wrote in these things, we can piece together a very substantial picture about what it's about. And we'll get a clear idea tonight what some of these things are.
I don't understand one problem. If it's Kiss and something after one Mashiach, to me that seems to make a problem of how does that, whatever the function of the Mashiach is going to be, it's not going to be served for all people who are not going to be there in the previous days.
No. But
it has a function. Is that function restricted to the dar which it occurs? I mean, that's what we're saying before.
Okay.
Because all those previous stars are not going to be present.
That's a shiloh.
They were for the Golos, not going to be there for the Gula.
Yeah, it's a question. That's not so simple. How they're going to be there. But I don't want to really go into the specific details. What I really want to go into is get a better understanding of what this period is called Yom Mashiach. And the fundamental question that I want to ask is that it really doesn't make any sense. The truth of the matter is, the whole Indian of Yom Mashiach is contrary to our entire Hashkafa system. Just like Chiyas HaMesim was. Yep. Why? It is. What's the kasha? We said before that the whole function of Olam Hazer, right, is to provide a mokum of a stadlus where man could earn his chelik in Olam Haba, correct? We said very clearly that in order to do this, he has to have a Yetzer and a Yetzer Tov. In order for Yetzer Tov to function, he has to function through the guf. Right? And there has to be function through the guf, and there has to be a world where the neshama can only see things through the guf, through the five senses. There has to be a hester on the das of the Banishim, on the idea of whether or not the Banishim exists. There cannot be a clear, you understand what I'm saying? There's got to be a certain level of unclarity on that kind of a situation. There has to be a certain choshech. You understand? There has to be a choshech and a hester.
Creates an ambiguity.
There has to be an ambiguity. Or else there's no Nesoyin. I mean, if we clearly see the Metzias HaBorei, then no one's going to do a chet. It's as simple as that. Who? Leave it go for a second. We'll get in a second. Leave it go. So there's got to be a strong ambiguity on the situation. A choshech or a heft upon him. Okay. The essential feature of the Yom Mashiach will be the pasuk in Yeshaya where it says, Umolo Deis Hashem K'mayim Liyom Mechasim. Now, what does that pasuk say? That the hasog of the Banishim, the emun of the Banishim, will be so secure, you see, and it will be so prevalent in the entire world Umolo ha'oret dea Hashem. The entire world will be filled with the idea of Hashem. K'mayim liyom machasim, as the waters cover the sea. It means when the waters cover the sea, it means they cover the land totally. Right? They totally, and in a very powerful, strong sense, there will not be a min and not be chorus and an atheist in the Yemot Mashiach. It will not exist. Every person, every yid, and every goy will be an absolute minimum in the Mitzvah of the Bnei Shalom. Do we see this? That's a clear pasuk, and there are many psukim which more this. The Bnei Shalom says, what do you call it? Es ruchia kol baso, v'hoya Hashem lemelech hakol ha'oretz, b'ayom ahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmei echad. B'ayom ahu is Yemot Mashiach. It's not Olam Haba. It's Yemot Mashiach. B'ayom ahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmei echad. I mean, it will be clear. There won't be a suffix. You see what I'm saying? So we see therefore that the central feature of Yemot Mashiach, you see, will be Gilu Yechudoi, or the knowledge of everyone of the Yuchot HaBorei and the Metzias HaBorei. Okay? Hence, there's a question. What does this have to do with the Tachlis of Olam Hazeh? Yemot Mashiach is part of Olam Hazeh, right? It's the end of Olam Hazeh. It's the climax of it. Caps it off, right? Right? Now we know that there were only, conceptually speaking, our Hashkafa system says that there are two periods. One period is the Zman of Gmul or Schar, and that period is called what? Olam Haba. And there's another period, because of the Cheson of Nam L'Ksufa, right, which necessitated the creation of another period before it, meaning that man has to earn Olam Haba, which is called, it's a Zman of Ishtadlus, and that's called Olam Hazeh. You see, there are no three periods, there are two. Either you're working for your paycheck, or you're getting your paycheck. That's it. There's nothing in between. There are certain stipulations or certain conditions which are necessary to both. In a Zman of Schar, in a Zman, right, of Schar, Gmul, what is the Olam Haba composed? What is the essence of Schar? What? Hasoga Sichudah, remember we said that? Ha'oras Ponov, and Hasoga, direct Devekis, which is our direct Hasoga of the Bnei Shalom. Correct? That's Olam Haba. The condition which are necessary for that kind of reality exists here. What's the purpose of Olam Hazeh? Bechira. And one of the main conditions in order to allow Bechira to take place is Hefti Yechudai. You see, which is the opposite. You see, in the matter of Ishtadlus, of Avodah, you have to have Hefti Yechudai. In the matter of Gemor, you have Gili Yechudai. Now, Yemot Mashiach is a part of Olam Hazeh, correct? What is the fundamental feature of Yemot Mashiach? Hefti Yechudai or Gili Yechudai? Gili Yechudai. So what is it? Just about. But it's a matter of open Gili Yechudai. Umar is a very powerful pasuk. Umar, not only the world, the Bria will be Makkah, the Bnei Shalom. Umar is there, Hashem Kamayim Liyom Mechasim. Voya Hashem Melech Chol Bayom Hu Yi Hashem Echad Ushmoy Echad. There's not a suffix around.
The question is, what's the
function? The shaila is, what is that? So therefore, the question is this, it's a twofold question. First of all, we do not understand, first of all, what such a period is there for, and now that such a period is a contradiction to what we do understand. You see what I'm saying? It's not that we don't know the tachlis of the Yemot Mashiach. You see, what we do know says that there should not be a Yemot Mashiach. Noch ergra, you understand? Worse. It's the same thing we have with Tchias HaMesim. The same thing. It's not that we didn't understand why everyone's got to come back. Who wants to come back? What is the purpose of it? What do you need to? What do you have to come back and go the second time? It's a tzar for the neshama. You mean? So therefore, what we consider to be a fundamental belief in the emunah of the Mashiach, right? And the Yemot Mashiach, is a contradiction to everything we understand. That's number one. Everyone has the question.
Another question also is, if there's so much looking at that time, why can the chesed be accomplished then?
Whatever it is, yeah. But that's not so much when it's a kind. The point is, so much wuchtig that shouldn't.
The Zidna Chaguf is not. It's going to be the light of Olam Haba. That only makes the question stronger. There isn't a Zidna Chaguf.
That's right.
That's what.
Maybe it should be.
It should be.
Yeah,
If it's so much gilui upon it.
But Lamaisa, you can understand this way. Since you have your question, but since Lamaisa there's not going to be Zidna Chaguf, then it's going to be lower than that. So it makes the question stronger because it makes it even more of a great period. It's not a real Olam Haba type. And it's not real Olam Haba because there's no Zidna Chaguf. But it's still just a tremendous increase in ruchnius. To what end? Like,
Get away of
why there's no time is a different question. I guess your question is a different question. Why wait 6,000 years?
Are we going to be on a higher level than others?
Yeah. Truth of the matter is, the other mission Kodim Achet was on a certain level of, it was still a certain level of Hester.
So everything that you explained to us about Adam will be past that?
Have we moved up? Have we moved up to the
There's
middle?
no statement of Molodei Hashem. The Yemot Mashiach is like one of the most incredible tkufas. It's incredible tkufa.
If we hold that the Tukul is arrived at, then we will be above our Rishon.
What's that?
If there will be
And it is, isn't it? But it's an incredible tkufa. It does not belong to the Matzav of Olam Hazeh.
All of his generations will not be in existence. In other words, just those people that are not living there.
Well, that's the Shaila. Who will what? But the point is, the people who live in Mos Mashiach will have a greater hasaga and hakol l'gonisham than any time ever before. What?
So you have to be Zohar.
Another Shaila. Why and who? Okay, that's the secondary question. You go into the details and all. First, the fundamental kasha is, what is the meaning of the entire tkufa?
Adam talked to Hashem, right?
So did Moshe.
So everybody's going to talk to Hashem?
Well, everyone. Every Yid will be on the level.
That you talk to Hashem?
Yes, everyone. That's it. Listen, everyone will be able to plug in. Everyone will be able to open up the plug and just tune in, you know? A Navi is a very special kind of person. He's a person who could be mizdabik to the Shechina right away, even while he's living, and mamash connect, communicate mamash directly with Ruchni.
Dial Hashem.
Dial Hashem. In a sense. I'm just putting it in a very tossed away. But since everything in this world today is in the Madison Avenue kind of cliche. In a way, it was that Moshe can click in.
Yeah, I mean, he was able to talk.
The truth is that Moshe don't know how to do it and on any place. The end of the game had to go through the process of preparation.
Well, they couldn't plug in at will.
No. Maybe Moshe Mashiach might be different, but...
Okay, well, I don't know, where did that go? Anyway, so that's the thing.
Where do we fit in?
So that's the thing. The second thing is, it's these things. If you look at a great deal of the Nevi'im, if you look at many of the Nevi'im, like the Shaya, the Cheskel, these are big, then a lot of the Treyasa, Ovadia, many of the Nevi'im, I mean, all over the place, all talk about the Yemot Mashiach. You see that? Look at all the Haftorahs by Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, all the Haftorahs, all of them, all of them, many of them talk about Yemot Mashiach. Most of Yeshaya is about that. They're talking about Mashiach. And they're all saying, what do we know about, how do we know about Yemot Mashiach? We know from Yeshua, we know from Ksubim, Nevi'im Ksubim, how do you know there'll be what do you call Yemot Mashiach min HaTorah? But basically we know it from the Nevi'im, we know the whole thing, Kabbalah from the Nevi'im, that's the way we know Yemot Mashiach. And they also, it's going to be, and they all mitzafet Yemot Mashiach and this and that. I mean, it's an incredible thing. And they're saying that this is the Tachlis and so on, Adarabah. From what we see, and the Ramban says this often. The Ramban said in the disputations, in the Sefer Vikuach, which is the Kisvei Ramban, and so on. You can return. He says because over there there's a Vikuach against Pablo Cristiani, the Ramban versus the Christians who is a Meshumad, and so on. And he's trying to say that, what do you call it, that in terms of the support for Jesus and so on and so forth. So the Ramban says, Adarabah, he says, if Christians look forward to the coming of Jesus, the second coming and so on. So he says, the truth of the matter is, an Emes Tzaddik doesn't want the Mashiach to come. An Emes Tzaddik doesn't want the Yemot Mashiach. No true Tzaddik wants the Yemot Mashiach. Really. Why not? What? Yes. Because it says, Toiv Sho'achach Ba'olam Hazeh.
Right.
Because the truth of the matter is,
there
are no Gerim in Yemot Mashiach.
Cannot be Masakin.
There are no Gerim. There are no Baal Tshuvas in Yemot Mashiach. So there's no meaning of being a Baal Tshuva. There's no Baal Tshuva.
No guarantee includes also Baal Tshuva, because in a sense there's
No knocker. Anybody can become a Baal Tshuva. No big deal. Everybody knows.
No, everyone's a tzaddik. Everyone's a novi already. You don't become a Baal Tshuva. You're a novi. You know what I mean? Automatically, you wake up one morning and you are a novi. That's it. You mean it's an incredible ma'isa. There's no Baal Tshuvas then. So a tzaddik is one. A tzaddik, the ikazach of a tzaddik is avida. It's the shtadlus. Connected to something, connected to things. And that's the way he's Krino Lomo. You're not Krino Lomo. In
those times you will not have any schar for a mitzvah.
No, of course not. There's no schar. Not in any real sense. No. But a lot of mitzvahs come but no true tzaddik wants it because that's it. You know, it's like an Olam Haba. There's no Baal Tshuvas in Olam Haba. There's no tzaddikim in Olam Haba. In Olam Haba, it's static. Olam Haba is a stationary situation. Huh? In its essence, it's stationary. But it's a stationary. The only place which has the concept of a dynamic, moving approach is Olam Haba. That's it. What's that? Yeah, what's in the Torah? Yes. No, that's a what? No, that's not so. That's not so. Not really. Because the ikazach of the Bonachom is nachas ruach lefonov, right? Correct? The nachas ruach lefonov is when he's toiv meitiv. That's his watson. The watson abore is to be meitiv. The Zulasai is to give Hatova, which is Olam Haba. Olam Haba is the Mokum of Hatova, right? That's his Watson. And the Ikos, like it says here, Tzadikim Yoshim, it was saying B'Rashem, but Tzadikim Yoshim, V'nenem Meziv Ashkina. This Hano is a Hatova, which the Bereshim wants. That's the Hatova he wants to give to all Tzadikim. And that gives him Nachas Ruach. But there are many levels of Hatova. The Nefesh for a mitzvah. And I'm creating more Olam Haba. You see, and more tova, you get a greater nachas ruach. So it's a direct connection. It's not that is the Rotzon HaBorah is to give the greatest hatova, but that hatova is telling your bechira, it's telling what you can create. You know? But the truth of the matter is, the Bonishim wants you to have as much as you can. So, but you can only have as much as you can in the matzah of bechira. But that's now. So the emes is a tzaddik really doesn't want the Mashiach. You see, because he wants the opportunity to do as many mitzvahs as he can, to create as much as he can, which fundamentally gives the Bonishim as much nachas ruach as possible, if you want to look at it that way.
So does he want to push
that's a very high way to look. What?
Does he want to push it by as much as possible?
Yeah, give me another 500 years. What? Lo hamesim yalika, right? Lo yiko, right? Kol yodeduma, right? That's it, right, exactly.
Yeah, but that's
what is it? I think it's a
you might Mashiach, you're alive. I mean, you're not dead at that time. That means mamish misa.
Yeah, but we're comparing the idea. But you see, the problem here, and this is the whole thing. What we're saying over here is, Rebbe says, what does that mean? Yeah, what do you mean Kof Sha'achas?
Because you cannot do mitzvahs. You cannot do mitzvahs.
It's not only even a tzaddik. He's talking about not just for Baal Tshuva, but tzaddiks also. He's saying Toiv isn't for who? For any person who's created. Toiv Sha'achas for Olam Hazeh. No, he's not. Who is he talking about?
Tzaddik could do another mitzvah.
Yeah, he's talking about everybody. Yeah, that's so. What's Toiv Sha'achas for Olam Hazeh? How could Olam Hazeh be better than Olam Haba? Because in Olam Haba it's static, it's stationary. What you have is what that's it for the Netzach Nitzachim. Here is where you could. It's dynamic. It's capable of moving from madrega to madrega.
Yeah, but what we said,
the flexibility, you see. And that's it. That's why in this world you can be clean of many olamas. Yeah, 1 hour in this world is more than all of them, because 1 hour you can be clean in 1 hour. Yesh adam sheklein olama b'sha'achas. Person can manage get Olam Haba in 1 hour.
Yeah, but
it's possible. So therefore, it's an incredible thing. The power. What he's saying is that the power. What is power? Power means the ability to do, or to affect, or to achieve. When you talk about the power of Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba has no shaykhs to the power of Olam Hazeh. In pure power. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because Olam Hazeh has the power to create that world over there. And to create it, to define it, to structure it, and determine its nature. You see, that's the power of Olam Haba. What's the power of Olam Haba? The power of Olam Haba is simply to be. not to create. It's simply to be. Olam haba is. You see.
All haba is becoming.
Olam haba is becoming. You see. Olam haba is being. You want to encapsulate it. Olam haba is being. Olam haba is becoming. Becoming is a power. Being is not. So the shaila is, in Evadoi, we're back to the question. I'm strengthening the question. Mashiach, what you know, it's already right. So what?
But
so what are we looking forward to? What are we looking?
No, but 1 second.
The tachlis of the bria is olam haba. That's the tachlis. No. The way we understand our system is that the tachlis of the bria is olam haba. That's what we all want. You see. Now, olam haba, the way it's defined. What? I'm sorry. The tachlis, yeah. What? We want Olam Haba, but who wants Yom Mashiach? Who wants a certain period of time which is an infringement on Avodah? What I want, if I'm given to the year 6000, that I want to take the full amount of time that I have to build up the maximum chelik I can get.
No, but
I don't want you to come and interfere with me and say, wait a minute, put it this way. I'll give you an example. Let's say you work for me, and I give you a certain amount of money, but I pay you by the day. Okay? And I say, you got a job for 5 days, from Monday to Thursday. Monday to Friday. You're working for 5 days, correct? Fine, I'll be with you in a second. 5 days, okay? So then what do you call it? I say to you, on Saturday you're going to rest, and that's what I'm going to give you. You're going to give you everything. And depending on what you get, that's what you're going to get on Shabbos. Fine. Okay, that sounds great. Then I say to you, then you're working and you're building up. And then I come to you Friday in the morning, I say, here's a tzul. I'm giving you a day off. So you say to me, I'm getting a day off, but am I going to get paid for the day? Of course not. You're not going to get paid for the day off. I'm giving you a day off. You know? So what are you going to say to me? I don't want a day off. I only have 1 day left. You know? And that day is critical. That's 1/6 or whatever the situation. I don't want that day off. Because I'm never going to get that again. Once Shabbos starts, I don't have a job. The job's gone. Do you know what I mean? So you're giving me a day off. You're not doing me a teva. You're being mastered me. You mastered me an opportunity. You see? So what is the Nevi'im talking about? All the Nevi'im Shai, they're saying there, some days in the Yom Mashiach, and we're all looking forward to. What are you looking forward to? What? To lost opportunities? I fail to understand it. I fail to see how we can all get hyped up about something which is a murder.
Yes, you can. Yes, but 1 second. The whole tachlis was to be the second. The whole tachlis was to be the second. The Chesaron of the Ksuf. That means by the time Yemoshe Mashiach will come, that was finished. So what's
no, it's not finished.
So if it's not finished, so you're saying at the time of Mashiach will still be a chance to be the second?
There's a little bit, very tiny little bit left.
So that means that you don't need more time. Right? Olam haba cannot come until the Chesaron is fulfilled, right?
Until the Tikkun is established.
So that means that one should know that time, there's enough time left to be masakin the rest of it.
No, but you can't make it better.
Well, no, you cannot make it better. There is that much of Chesaron. There's that much.
All right, see, you're along the road. Along the road.
But I think that.
So I first want to. The beginning of the Mali, because you see what you're doing, you're working backwards.
Yeah.
You saw what I did. You saw what I did. So big Avaz, anything on backwards.
How about this? Because you're looking at.
Okay, we'll take a second, but it's along. You're beginning on the road. Yeah.
You're doing it strictly for his name. The question name should be because the head thing question name. You want that to be.
The presidium of Mashiach.
You want that?
And deserves that his name.
But you see, the purpose is not his name. The purpose is the purpose of Bria. But his ego. The purpose of Bria is a tikkun of Nam L'Ksufa. That's it. The Buddhism is not doing it for himself. It's for you. He's doing it. So the question that we're asking here. The question that we're asking here is obviously, first of all, we don't understand the function or the tachlis of Yemoshe Mashiach. Number one, it's not an olam hazadik function. And it's not an Olam Haba function. So it seems to be an Olam Haba in Olam Hazeh. It's almost like an Avuvya, a tziruf, like a mixture, which doesn't make sense to us. Number one. Number two, it seems to be a hefsid. Yet the Nevi'im all look forward to it. And there's another thing also which bothers me also. Very strange question. there's another question which is a very strange question, which I mean, almost people think of it in a different way, but another way you have to think of it like this. If you look at all the Nevi'im again, Yemos Mashiach, it's like many Nevi'im like Yeshaya is filled with Yemos Mashiach. I mean, and so on and so forth. Now, Yeshaya was talking a long time ago. Yeshaya was about 2,600 years ago. It's a long time ago. Okay? 2,600 years ago, it's like half. He was at half of the Bria from where we are now, basically, which is, so on. And at that point in time, he's already talking about a Mashiach, holy Mashiach. Now, a long time has happened since Yeshaya talked. In Nachamu, it's a long time since that time, since Yeshaya. Now, if you really think, obviously we know the Yemos Mashiach must occur by the year 6,000. Right? Okay. Now, and the Nevi'im seem to indicate that the Tachlis, the Ika Zach of the Bria, the Ika Simcha of the Bria will be Yemos Mashiach. That seems to be what's implied in the Nevi'im. So on. If you calculate the amount of time left, the amount of time that always has transpired, you see about how much percentage. We have 256 years left, over 5,744. Now, if you give me a percentage reading on that, what percent of time is left for the end of Olam Hazeh?
1990 will mark the last 124th.
Yeah, it's about...
Divide 26,000 by 24, it's 250 times.
Yeah.
So 1990 will mark the last 124th.
So we're talking about 4%, a little more than 4% left. In other words, what the Nevi'im have talked about thousands of years ago has not happened, and there's only 4% of the time left. 96% of the time of the Bria has gone by without anything. You see, 96% of the time has transpired with this haftocha never having taken place. Now that's a staggering thing, and you ask yourself, it's a strange thing. It's a very strange thing. If this is supposed to be such an Ika Simcha, and supposed to be so important in the eyes of the Banisham and the eyes of the Bria, this and that, why is that 96% of the time has gone by and nothing like that has ever happened? It's just it's a very strange kind of thing. You understand what I'm kind of saying? It's not so much a kasha, really. It's an observation. That if this is, you got to be zoicha, but still, there's an Indian of Be'ita, Be'ini Ba'achishena. It's just funny that something which Yeshaya was so, the Banisham saw it was so important to the Banisham that it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a medrash to Yeshaya the Maisa. The Yaakov Shimoni, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzafer Le'Oivei Shel Mashiach. The Banisham sits and waits, Kavyochol, to that all. The Banisham wants this like he wants nothing else. He wants this. It's a strange thing, and you see this in the Nevi'im. You see this in everything else. Now, how many tzaddikim sat there with little things, they had like a special room or a special suitcase, or they had things, whatever it's of a time that waited every day. What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah you have to sit every day. Every day you can come, and that's it. And it's a mitzvah, mamash, to be maimed, to be mitzafer, not to be mekava, not to hope that he's going to come, to be mitzafer, to wait with anxiety. Panting, wait, anxiety, for example. So I once read a very interesting marshal, I forget, what it is, for example, is if a person was very sick, very, very sick, and if another person came, he was lying in his bed, he was very sick, and another person came and says, I want you to know the doctor's on his way. Doctor's on his way. How would that sick person anticipate the coming of that doctor? Very significantly. That's what it means, Tzipur Mashiach. That's what it means. You have to wait the Mashiach that's what it means. Tzipur Mashiach is synonymous with the Indian of Doeg and Churban Beis HaMikdash. It's the same thing. Because to feel that, we're going to a little bit, to feel the Yerida of this world, to feel the Richok from this world for Ruchnius. How many people feel that really? But if a person is called to Ruchnius, if a person really feels what Ruchnius is, right? He would have a tremendous tzar, because the loss of the Beis HaMikdash was the loss of a certain level, tremendous level of Ruchnius, of Hashua Shechina. That's what it was. So it produced a tremendous tzar, you see. If you people could be zoicha to be magish the tzar Tishabov, in that kind of sense, that's a very high madrega in that kind of sense. It's the same thing. What kind of tzar is that? It's like a sick man waiting for the doctor. That's really what it is. That's the union of Tzipur Mashiach. So that's the thing. So you're supposed to be mitzvah b'chol yoyim achakalo. I'm waiting. I'm being mitzvah. Tzipur tzipisu li Yeshua, or you mitzvah Yeshua. That we're supposed to be waiting for. Isn't it funny that something which is supposed to be so critical and so intense
One of the
that
questions
was supposed to be
Yom
Shua, right? And one of the questions they ask when you get to Yom Adin is Tivul Shua. Oh, so isn't it funny that something which is so critical as Tivul Shua, 96% of the time of the world should have gone by and nothing, absolutely nothing. Not only nothing, but we look like we have about as much shaykhs as the Neif Mashiach, right? As we look, what do you call it? Having shaykhs to watching the Kabbalah sitting all of us in Har Sinai, all of the Makabal of the Torah from the Banish themselves. That's how much shaykhs we have. The Mashiach. That's how weit we are. We think if the Mashiach is going to come, we should have come a long time ago. You see,
when the world is better.
Who's he coming to? If he doesn't come soon, difficult situation.
The Gemara says when how the Moshe Mashiach will look. The Gemara says that everybody's going to be mechutzes and.
They describe. The Gemara describes.
It's going to be so bad that you guys are not going to have the possibility to.
Well, it says there. The Ikvus Mashiach is the door right before Mashiach. So the Gemara says what will be some of the features of Ikvus Mashiach? Chutz b'yizger ha'eretz mushlachas al ha'eretz. Truth will be an absolute contempt. And and all these things, rishis and ra and cool, these things will be, and the height of Kishendo, gashmius, richut from ruchnis and so on and so forth, taivus and gaiva, and what it covered, all of these are what tamam, emes and chachomim will be niswach, chachomim will be niswach, will be in contempt. This. But it's incredible. If you really think of it, no one really says something no one really thinks of it. But if you really think of it for a second, Yemais Mashiach is supposed to be the epitome of the Bria. Yet it's supposed to come after a time which is the zenith of the Bria comes at a time which is the nadir of the Bria, the lowest point. I mean, how can you have such a time after how can you have Mebo Amikta Le'igro Lama? That's an expression. From the pits, Mebo Amikta, from the deepest pits, Le'igro Lama, to the highest heights. Like a rocket ship in one shot. I mean, it's incredible.
Maybe that's the only way it can happen.
It's Chevla Mashiach. We won't get into that.
People before Mashiach will be on such a long break, it'll be hard for them to be good. Only if you have more or less,
But such a high point? Such a high point? That's after. That's not after. The Shilas, we're not going to get into in a second why this is before. But we'll get into that in a minute. We'll talk about that. But that's one of the key features here. So anyway, we see therefore that this whole Yemos Mashiach is a very, very strange situation. The truth of the matter is, if you really think into it, it boggles the mind. It boggles the mind in the sense that it makes absolutely not any sense at all. And with this, next week... What's that?
Cliffhangers.
You're a cliffhanger,
We're all going to your house,
Is that what it is? We're not leaving this place until we know the test. Things I'm mechuyev to say a teretz, because the truth of the matter is, if I leave it at this point,
the whole week now we're in trouble.
No, you'll be doing the whole week. If
that any moment.
Yeah, you're and they're going to come. The Shemaim's going to come after me and says, "What are you doing? You're going to mach it up there." They say also the Abarbanel, the Pisha Abarbanel al Torah. I think I don't know if I said this once. He what he does is he has a style where he takes a sugi in the Torah, a certain in the Torah, and then he asks a bunch of kashas. Often the kashas like 5, 8, 10 kashas. Number one, and then he gives all the tutzim, what he, how he considers to be the tutzim, and that's a style. First he has the kash and tutzim. So they say there's one guy that he said, first I want to learn all the kashas first. I don't know all his kashas and so on. So he learned all the kashas, and by the time he finished, he was a total apikoros, and he had no desire to go to tutzim anymore, and that's it. So so we don't want to be accused of that kind of style, those kind of things. So this kind of thing.